Okay, dokes. All right, so an overview of this semester. So basically, what we'll be doing is we're going to focus a lot more on visualization, real-time sequencing, as well as animation. So we're going to try and ease into it. I'm going to start off today with like basic animation, which is really similar to the Unity animation timeline. So today should be like pretty easy to ease you into the concepts. There's a few little tiny things we need to know. We'll try and export something into Unity, but overall it'll be pretty handy. We're then going to move to rigged animations. Now, I was considering moving to Maya to do the animations, but I'll probably stick in Max just to make it a little easier. Now, I have done the Maya stuff. It's not that hard, so if you ever do think about swapping over, like it shouldn't be too much of an issue for you. But we'll just keep it, I'd say, on whatchamacallit, on a 3ds Max for now, unless people really want to do Maya. Just let me know. Nothing. Okay, so we'll look at a couple of different methods of animation. So we'll be doing our own animation, so our own kind of like bipedal rigs. I'm going to show you to make a custom rig, and the reason being, there you can find a lot of humanoid rigs easily for like cheap or free online that are really good. There's a tool called Mixamo we'll look at as well, where you can even put in your own characters that you've modeled and rig it within Mixamo, and then use their animations for it. It's actually pretty handy. However, the issue then becomes that you can only really use bipedal animations, and you can only really use the animations that they have in the library, which the library is huge, so it's usually fine. But especially if you're trying to do like, let's say, if you're making something for like League or Overwatch, where that's very stylized and the characters kind of move very specifically, very differently. And I'll share like a video on that later. It means that you probably need to create your own rigs. So we're going to be creating like intermediate rigs. We're not going to be creating like super basic, super simple ones, but we're also not going to be going really crazy and doing like facial kind of animation and like nose controls and eyebrow controls and stuff like that. But we'll see. Maybe we will. So that will be the first part of the semester, and then we will be moving on to sequencing. And sequencing will be stuff like basically creating a movie in Unity or Unreal, depending on which one becomes easier to use by the time we hit there. So sequencing is basically you set up a bunch of animations, you set up a bunch of triggers for things to happen, and you play it, and it literally just sequences it. You can move the camera around, you can create like a whole bunch of like little movie clips, and you render them directly from within Unity. And the benefit of that, as opposed to original kind of rendering, which you would set it up in Maya or Max, and then hit the render button, is you get a much faster turnaround, and you can tweak stuff a lot easier. You can add scripts in much easier, and the fidelity isn't quite as good, but it's good enough for a lot of stuff. If anyone follows kind of like VFX YouTubers or kind of like info in general about CGI, you may know that The Mandalorian, Jungle Book, Lion King all use Unity and Unreal, hooked up to cameras that were basically like kind of little VR headsets, so they could film someone on a green screen and see where they were in like a Unity environment, if that makes sense, because the camera was locked to follow the Unity environment position. Or in Mandalorian, they had like giant LED screens behind all the characters, so instead of a green screen, they would show the scene in Unreal behind the characters while they were doing their acting, and that way they get lighting information as well, and it's all real time. And again, that's the power of using a game engine for that. Because if you're going to render that in a traditional engine like Max or Maya, it would take like days, with a much higher fidelity. But sometimes it's not the fidelity you want. Sometimes you want it to be real time. So that this is kind of like a big new emerging area. So I like focusing on it because I think it's something that you may find jobs in like 3 4 years. And in fact, one of our alumni is already working for a cinematic sequencing team in Larian here, Chris Bongo. So and he came directly out of like our first real time sequencing semester. Like it was the first time it was introduced, and based off that, he did a test, and then he got a job in Larian. He put in a lot of work, but it was based off that. So yeah, that's kind of like the semester what it'll look like. I'll hopefully be able to get, if they have time, one of the cinematic supervisors from Larian. If not, I'll try and get it from somewhere else, to come in and essentially like not grade, but sort of like give feedback on your sequences. But this will be later towards the end of the year. Any questions before we begin? Okay. All right. So for today, we're just going to be taking it easy and messing around in 3ds Max. What we'll be doing is we're going to be creating just a little animated sequence. Um, Anybody know those like breakfast machines that like you see sometimes on old old films and stuff? So like automatic breakfast machines, or like Wallace and Gromit had them a lot.
Like
Like conveyor belt.
Yeah, like the Rube Goldberg machines, exactly.
Oh, yes.
So we're gonna try and make something like that and then import it to Unity, because it'll be pretty simple to do. So like I'll post this link in. Oh, no thanks. It'll be just something like this, but we'll make like a really simple one, all right? And then we'll bring that into Unity, and have it animate. Now we won't go crazy like this. Like this is way more difficult. A lot of stuff that goes on here, and it'll take ages. But we'll just do like simple stuff. All right. So one thing that we can do within 3ds Max is we can do physics simulations. However, physics simulations don't always translate into Unity. You'll need to like do something called baking. So you like take their frame every second. Sometimes it's easier to simulate within Unity. Sometimes it's easier to keyframe it yourself, and that's a concept we'll be talking about, which you should be familiar with if you've done animation since design practice in first year, keyframing. So for today, I'd like us to focus just on keyframing. If you want to mess about and do the physics simulation, there's a thing called Mass Effects here that you can do like you can do physics simulations in it. There we go, Mass Effects. You can even do like fluids and stuff like that. But fluids is a different thing. I don't know of any way that fluids can go into Unity at the moment. You're probably better off creating a shader solution in Unity itself. But you can bring Mass Effects into Unity. So Mass Effects is just like physics simulation. So like say I want to explode something, I can add a force and things explode. But you can also do that within Unity. So there's kind of like an argument of like which is better. I kind of like doing stuff within Unity just because I think you get a bit more control over it and you can tweak stuff a lot easier. Like if I want to tweak something, I don't have to go back all the way, redo the Mass Effect simulation in here. But for keyframes, you this is pretty good for doing keyframes in. And then when we get to character rigging, which we'll start on from next week, it'll be easier to keyframe within 3ds Max. And then in Unity, you're just assigning the animations. You're not doing any animation within Unity because Unity's animation system is like, it's okay, but it's not great. All right, so this is the part of the thing that's confusing for you guys nowadays, because a lot of the tool sets used to have very defined roles. So like, you go here to model, you'd go to Maya to animate, you go to Unity to put it all together. But now, because you can kind of do a bit of everything in a lot of the programs, it's kind of hard to figure out which one to do in which program, and sometimes that changes depending on the project as well. But we'll just try, like, I'll try and show you the sequences of what I usually do. Just know that it may or may not be what you need to do in your projects in future. That makes sense. So yeah, before I begin, any other questions? Cool. I hear typing, so I don't know if that's a question.
No question. Sorry.
That's cool. All right, so I'm just gonna make a little box here, just to start off with, just to show you the concept. So 1, 1, 1. It's just a 1 meter box. Super simple. Why is my? It's gonna change my grid as well. So if you don't remember, right click on the snaps, go to the home grid, grid spacing. I want that to be every 1 meter. So that's fine. Okay, so I have this little box. Now, remember I was saying to you last time we were talking that this box isn't 1 meter? Doesn't seem like it fits a meter. I'm suspicious. Let me just check my unit setup to make sure it's correct. Metric meters. 1 unit, 1 meter. Huh, okay. I guess it is. So remember I was talking about pivot points, and you can see like on the box, by default, the pivot point's down the bottom. So if I rotate the box, it's actually rotating around its pivot point, and it will always rotate around its pivot point. So sometimes I want it there, sometimes I don't. In this case, I don't. The reason being, if I want to do like an animation of the box like flipping around, it's going to rotate like this, which is not necessarily what I want, right? So if I want that pivot point to be fitted correctly, what I'll do is, I'll go to hierarchy, effect pivot only, and I can then manually move it myself, or I can just go center to object, boop, and it's now centered to the object. You can align it to the object, you can align it to world. The reasons why you might do that is like, let's say I want this to be a diamond or something. Let me just snap the angles. Let's say I want that, right? 45 degrees. But I want the pivot point to still face the world. So if I look at the pivot point, it's now like 45-degree angle. So I can go align to world, and now it's aligned to the world. Okay, so there's these things. You can also align to other objects and stuff like that. So this is kind of important. It was kind of important when we were modeling. It's very important now that we're modeling. So I have my little diamond sort of here. And what I'm going to do then is do a really simple animation. So I'm going to try and make this start here probably. Let's just start there. And then just kind of like do a little flippy or something. So I'm going to start by hitting auto. And auto here on this whole timer, this whole section is all to do with animations. We'll now set it to red, which means it's recording, and I can make animations. Because I have it set to auto, this means when I make a keyframe change here, and this is very similar to Unity, like when you're recording. So let's say I want it to squish down, like it's getting ready to jump up. So I'm going to put it like there, and I'll squish it down. Now, one thing you may notice, and anyone who's done animation, what have I done wrong here? If you remember squash and stretch, I know there's animation people here. There's
You need to start the first one at 5D. Alright, don't start
No, so it automatically adds one at 0. So the thing that I need to do, and that's why I was asking the animation people, but I guess they forgot, is I squashed it this way, which is fine, but if you if you see when I squash it, it just gets flatter. Oh my god, you're not even paying attention. It just gets flatter. It doesn't feel like if you squish a real football or a ball or whatever. If you squish it down, it doesn't just like get smaller. It also squeezes out the side, right? So when you hit R, it expands. Yeah, if you hit R, it stays. The volume stays constant. Is basically what it's doing. So if it gets shorter, it has to get wider. And vice versa. So
if I get different settings of scale for that.
Yeah, so that's exactly what I was going to say. if you keep hitting the scale shortcut, there is one that is select and squash, meaning if I do that, you can see that like as I squish it, it kind of like keeps its volume, like so. So in this case, I'll do that, and then I'll move it down as well. So now we should hopefully get quite a bit of a better kind of like, you see like it looks a lot more like it's actually squishing and getting ready to launch. And then let's launch it up into the air. Boop. And this time when I scale it, I'm going to scale
Don't forget
it
the
down.
stretches. Yeah.
So now we go boop. And that looks a lot better than if I didn't have that squash and stretch. It would just look like the box going up there. All right, so this is still important. This kind of like the principles of animation still apply in 3D, exactly the same as in 2D. You just have another axis to worry about. Okay, so let me just show you what that looks like without squash and stretch and why this is so important. Let's do it on a different, on a sphere. Hey sphere, you stay here. Your pivot point is already set. I have auto. Oh, if I want to delete the keyframe, just select it, hit delete. And it is now back to normal. I'm going to set that first frame on 0. So let's follow what the box is doing. So we'll just move it down. We boom squash it, and then it goes up. And it goes up. And now we play them side by side. Like the ball just looks kind of, it's moving. It's doing all the same movements, but it doesn't have the same kind of what we call appeal. The cube almost feels alive, whereas the sphere is just like, okay, whatever. It's just moving. Okay. So let me delete that sphere now. Okay. So now the other concept that you need to know, and this is again really similar to Unity. So let's say I'm moving up here, and then I'm going to make it do like a little spin in the air. Okay. So let's do a little spin. And the more that I spin, you can see it's recording my my spin. So it's gonna keep recording how many spins until I let go. So I'm clicking and dragging here. Now the only thing is, this is a brand new keyframe. So you can see down here, there's a red keyframe that's position. There's a blue keyframe that's scale, and there's a green keyframe. Green keyframe is rotation. There's no previous green keyframes except at 0. This means that it's going to start rotating from here, which may not be what I want, right? So I may have wanted it to squish up to here and then from here rotate up, but because I didn't have a rotation keyframe, it can't do that. So what I need to do, if I wanted that, for example, so I wanted to squish, and exactly up to here, I'm like, okay, this is perfect. I want this to stay this way. I can add a key here. So if I set keys, it's going to set all keys. So you see there's one key for rotation, scale, and position, and it's all set here. Whenever you see this like sandwich of 3 colors, this is like a locked key. So it's this like little locked key. And that means no matter what I do after this keyframe, whatever happens until here, it's locked. So everything behind it is safe, okay? So if I do the same thing now, if I go here, and let me just scale it back so it's normal, and do like a little rotation, let's do like a 360. Cool. You see that the rotation only happens only from that point. Okay, and it should probably have a bit of position movement as well. So it's still kind of like hanging in the air, because otherwise it just looks like it just stops in midair. Okay, all good so far?
Yeah.
Alright, and then I can lock it there again if I want to. And as I move on here, squish this back up. Move it up a bit. So it's kind of like it's hanging in the air. And then it's going to drop down. Alright, so let's do it. Oh, sorry. I always hit that by accident. Let's drop it down. Oh no, it's gone back to normal scaling. And then we can actually probably copy this one, because this squashing, it's probably pretty good for when it hits the ground. So I can just select it like that, just select it or click on it, hold shift, drag it to the end, and squish. And if I want to go back to here, again, hold shift, drag it to there, and now it's a full. Wait, let's see. Does that look weird? Oh, the rotation. Okay, that's because I have a rotation here. So let's delete the rotation keyframe from there. Delete key and delete rotation key. So then it goes boop back down to here. Cool. And this is just me scrubbing through the timeline like so. If I want to play it, I just hit this play button. And now I can see that I should have played before because it's super slow. I can also click on this little key here. And oh, okay, now I know why it's super slow. So this little thing here, this little like time configuration, if I click on that, you can kind of ignore all this stuff. This is more stuff for old school like TV and film. That's why it's got NTSC and PAL. So you can sort of ignore this and leave it as frames because we want to deal with frames. Playback real time, meaning it'll play at the same speed. Active viewport only, that just means I only have one viewport, but if you had those four, it would only play in whichever one you're selecting. Loop means it'll hit the end and start back again. And then for some reason it's set on speed quarter. I think that's because I was working on a project before and I had it on quarter speed. So we hit it on 1 speed. By default it should be 1 time speed, so it'll play at 1 time speed. And then this is the animation time. So right now it's 0 to 100. You can see my bar, it's 0 to 100. But in this case, I just want to see this animation play. I don't care about anything else. I'm going to go 0 to 35. This doesn't delete anything past here. It just like, it only puts the timeline to show 0 to 35. It doesn't delete anything behind there, okay? Hit OK. Cool. So let's press play. That's much better. And if I don't like it, for example, I can tweak some of the framing. So I think this one stays up there a little long. So I'm just going to move these and just literally just drag them. So I'm going to move that. Maybe make it drop a little. Should I make it drop a little faster or slow? Let's play that. I think a little faster. And we'll have the squash be longer. Bit better. I think the squash should happen faster as well. Okay, I think that's a bit better. So it's all about tweaking these little time frames, right? And anything that happens in this 35 frames, if I have other stuff animating, they'll also happen within this 35 frames. Okay, and that's how you would get something like a Rube Goldberg machine working. Something else we can do is, and this is a little complicated, we can hit the, oh, let me close that so you can see what I did. We can hit this little button here, which is the mini curve editor. So we can hit that. And by default, if I zoom in here, can I zoom in? Let's can't really zoom in more. You can see these are the keyframes here, and the whole point of a curve is, yeah, that's great, the principles of animation. There's also another little one. You probably don't remember, but we did cover that in first year, but that was a long time ago. So you can see like this is the timeline here as well, and these are keyframes showing the position and scale and rotation. So by default, the curves use something called a kind of like smooth spline curve, like they're smooth, right? So when they have animations, they kind of ease in and ease out a little, and that's by default. They do it like that, meaning if I move something to somewhere, it doesn't go directly to there. It kind of like slows down a little bit just before it hits the, which is usually good, especially if you're trying to make physics looking animations like I am. If I don't want that, let me show you an example which would make more sense. Let me just grab a little cylinder. And let me just close these curves. So an example would be, Set to, ooh, turn off the animation while I'm doing this. Center to object and then turn back on. So let's say I'm at frame 0 again. Start again. And I want this little cylinder to rotate like 180. Okay, so I'm just going to rotate it 180. Oh. Oh, 360, sorry. Okay, cool. Now if I press play though, you see the way it's kind of pausing? So it has this ease in, ease out set up by default. So it's kind of like not rotating, it's not continuously rotating. Because it is trying to emulate like character animation. And when you move, you don't like instantly, like when you swing your arm doesn't swing instantly to the maximum speed, right? It kind of accelerates really quickly, and then when you stop your arm, it kind of decelerates, like it's in a really short amount of time, but it makes it feel real. So that's why it's doing that, right? Because this is kind of designed for character or animals or whatever it is. Normally, if you were going to simulate physics, you would use a physics simulation. We can tweak this though. So right now, this is just rotating and the little pauses are happening, which I don't want. So what I can do, and that's why I showed you the curve editor. If I open the curve editor, and this, you can see the little spline. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of like a little curve, and it's curving down again. Can you see that? Or no?
Yeah.
Okay. So I can just select it. Let me just select everything. If I just hold control, I can keep selecting. You see there's little handles, and this controls like the spline. So let me just tweak that to show you. So let me control the spline there. And I don't know if I can control this one. Oh, I can. There we go. Come on. No, sorry, that was the position one. I don't want the position one. Leave me alone. Okay, so now this will change how it reacts again. So it's even more slow now. Flip. And sometimes you want that, right? So like if you imagine a Rube Goldberg machine that's like ticking away in a timer, this may be what you want. However, if I want to rotate like a propeller, instead of messing with the splines, I can, remember hold control to select both. I can mess with the splines so they're straight, or I can just hit the set tangents to linear. And that will make it straight, perfectly straight. And now when I press play, it should just rotate. You see? It's lagging a little bit just because I'm recording and doing all this stuff, but it's not, that little pause is not in the animation, it's just lagging. So now sometimes you can see it working correctly. Any questions on that? Okay.
I presume that only affects the cylinder. The cube isn't affected by what you just did.
So, good question. Whatever I'm selecting, I'm only applying keyframes for that one thing. So if you look at the timeline, if I select the cylinder, I only have 2 keyframes, one to start, one at the end. If I select the cube, I have all the other keyframes that are for the cube. So it only affects what I'm selecting. These are all now different game objects. If I import this to Unity, which I'm going to show you now in a second, well actually I'm going to let you mess with this animation thing for a while, then I'll show you importing into Unity. But if I import this into Unity, I can import them as one single FBX, but they will be 2 different children of that FBX. Okay? And they should have their own animator and animation. When we go to character animation, we'll have something called a rig, and the rig will have like a skeleton, and you animate the skeleton, and the skeleton is made of loads of different pieces, but the whole skeleton is one thing. So when you animate it, it's going to be all the animations for the skeleton in one timeline. We're not going to go between different pieces. We're just doing different little pieces here because I don't want to cover rigging just yet. We're just getting to grips with the concept of animation within 3ds Max. So what we're going to do is we're going to mess around with that a little bit, and then we're going to try to import it into Unity and get it working within Unity so you can see the process of importing animations that you've created into Unity. That all okay so far? So far most of the stuff we've done you can do within Unity itself. You can do it within the animator. Like literally even the curves and stuff like that, that's all within Unity as well. You can't do it in either. So that's why like stuff like this kind of animation, it actually may be better to do in Unity, but we need to learn this because this concept will apply when we go to do character animation in Max, sorry. Okay, so if there's no questions, what I'm going to do is kind of pause you for a sec and let you mess with the animation things by yourself. All I want is for you to make like a little cube or a sphere or whatever that just does that. Literally just that. Nothing more. And you can do the little cylinder if you want as well. So I want you to get to grips with understanding how this works. I'm going to pause recording right here. And I'll be back to you in like, let's say 10 minutes. I'll still be here, but just like in 10 minutes, we'll resume the next section. Okay, we are back live. Let me just double check it's recording. It is. Okay, cool. So we should have done some stuff and we're ready to export. We can either export them both together, but for the ease of use, because I want to like have this one by itself and this one by itself, I may export them individually. So I'll just like select one, file, export selected. And this time, let's go to quick access, asset design. Where's asset design? There we go. And we're going to do cube jump. Save that as an FBX. So what we need now is like we have geometry. In the normal geometry, we have this thing called animation only. Do not export geometry. Now, this is especially useful if you have a rig. Because if you have a rig and let's say you have like, I don't know, like a little squirrel that's less horrifying than the squirrel we just saw in Food Fight. So, and you're doing like a walk cycle, run cycle, whatever, and then you kind of realize at the end, oh, dang, I need like a jump cycle. You can make the jump animation and then export just the animation. So you don't have to export the geometry, meaning like the mesh of the squirrel. So in this case, I do need the geometry because I don't have a cube. So I'm not going to have that ticked, but just FYI, that's there. And then we now need to have this animation toggle turned on for the first time in forever. We can leave the extra options. For bake animations, we may or may not want to bake. So what baking animations will do, if I import this now, it's going to import to Unity with these keyframes. So one keyframe to like here. So it's going to have 35, but it'll have keyframes at those set points. If I bake it, it's going to have a keyframe on every single frame. So it's going to be like, okay, at this frame, it's on the ground. At this frame, it's squashing a little bit. This frame is squashing a little bit more. And it's just going to add frames to every single frame in the timeline. Sometimes you may want that, especially if you import it and the animation's a little wonky. Maybe it didn't import correctly because sometimes when you export and import, there's a bunch of different filters and like compression errors that can happen. So if you ever run into that issue, you may want to bake. The other reason you may want to bake is if you have like a specific animation that is, let's say, simulated, so like a cloth animation or something like that. You want to bake it so it's exactly each frame, the shape of the cloth, right? So sometimes you want to bake. In this case, I'm going to try to not bake, and this will reduce the amount of frames. It's only tiny, but sometimes when I just worked on the game that I'm working on, we just did like a huge animation crunch, and like animations are tiny, but when you have hundreds or thousands of them, they do build up. So let's turn that off. We can kind of leave everything here. Deformations, skins, and morphs, we're not going to touch yet. We'll be dealing with morphs maybe a little later. And then we can just leave all of these are just for like optimizing the animation, but we can also do that within Unity. And we can kind of leave the rest of these just empty. So the only real thing you need to worry about is just the bake animation, whether that's on or off, and just make sure animation is ticked. So let's go OK. Let's export it. Let's export the cylinder as well. And it's also an FBX. Animation's on, cool. Right, go to Unity. Let's open our asset design. Oh, I only saw that now, Daniel. Sorry. How do you add new frames? If you want to lock the frame, it's that little key button. If you just want to add a frame, as long as auto is on, you'll add frames. Unity is still loading. Alright, so we're in. So I'm just going to import this, so create a folder. This would be semester 2. Oh, everyone has joined the game asset implementation module, right? From Brightspace. Because we're on the second module now. We're not on the game asset design anymore. It's very confusing.
Yeah.
Okay, and then in semester 2, let's import this animation in. Oh, let's create another folder actually. So animation, beginner. And let's import these assets. Cylinder rotate, cube jump, import. Okay, so let's go to cube jump because that's the one I was messing with. If I look at that here, so first of all there's a model, all this stuff is all the basic stuff, so scale factor, how big it's going to be, whether I convert the units 1 meter to 1 meter unity, that's fine. Blend shapes we'll go over in a second. Optimized mesh is like, it'll optimize it, so if it's very complex it'll reduce it, but it should be fine for a cube. And then the rig, so we have our own rig here. Like the only options here are legacy, generic, and humanoid. Legacy is an older version. Generic is like any generic rig. We don't even have a rig, we actually just have keyframes. But you can just leave it as generic. Humanoid is specific to Unity, and that's a humanoid specific Unity that allows you to do things like IK movement. So like if you have a walking animation, if you set it to humanoid, you can have things like the foot will adjust to the terrain. It'll still try and do the animation, but it'll adjust its foot to the terrain, that sort of thing. So climbing up steps, that kind of stuff. You'll probably need a humanoid for that. But for now, we'll keep it on generic. And let's go to animation. So we do want to import animation. Yes, we do. Constraints are... I think we'll look at constraints a little later. We can have a look at constraints after this. But constraints are stuff like locking something to the world or linking something to something else. So like whatever that thing moves, you also move. So I can have also constraints like look at constraints. So I'll have like like the cube will face something. So if I have like the cylinder moving around the cube, I can have the constraint face the cylinder, if that makes sense. Right, so these are all constraints. However, in my experience, the constraints don't always carry over very well. So if I wanted to do something like that, I would probably do it in Unity with code. So I'd have like a look at within Unity. So I'd have the cube look at the cylinder. If you don't know what a look at is, it's just a scripting thing. It's literally type look at, and it'll use the pivot point to look at something. So here's where we see resample curves, meaning it'll try to reread the curves and look at them. And animation compression, it's got keyframe reduction. We can turn that off, meaning we don't want to reduce keyframes. And this is for like saving space, essentially. This, I have no idea what this does, actually, to be honest with you. I think these are for special properties, but I've never used this. So here is the clip. So if I press play, oh, it works. Great stuff. It's animating there. And I can give it a name. So I can say this is test. What will I say? Jump. Okay. So that whole thing is jump. However, we can also cut this down. So, for example, I want to turn on... Let me just finish this off first. So it goes from 0 to 35, which is correct. I can scrub through here if I want to see what it looks like. I also can put on loop time, and that means it'll loop. So let me press play. Great stuff, and it's looping. It always shows you looped here, but if I was to put this in an animation, it would play once and stop. But if I put loop time on, it's going to keep playing over and over, okay? And then you can kind of leave the rest of the stuff, to be honest with you. You don't really have to mess with them too much. You can add events, and this is good for if you want to add code. So for example, like exactly where it's up here, we could add an event here for something to happen, like a function, like hit the top of my jump, and I can like add a float there so a number happens, and that this means that I can access this event, so I know that at this point of the animation it is doing that. Now this is really useful for fighting games, or like a game where I'm swinging a sword and I want to turn on the hitbox specifically at a certain point. You can do it within the animation here, so you can set that event within the animation. Okay, so that is useful for that. But we're kind of focusing on animations for now, but just know that it's there. The events can be pretty useful. So this is the full animation. So jumps to full animation. But let's say I want to cut it down. Let's say I want to have sequences that happen only when I want them to happen. So we can cut it down to, let's say up to here. That's where it squashes, right? I think it's frame 5. Yeah, and it goes up. So frame 5. So I'm going to start at 0. We're going to end at 5. And we're going to call this like prepare to jump. So cube underscore prepare to jump. And that'll just have no loop time, but it's just going to have that. So it's just that animation. And that way I can use this multiple times in different parts. I can even use it when it's not jumping. I can be like, if something jumps on top of it, I'll just play that animation, which can work as well. And let's go, so it's like 5 to like 9. It's like going up in the air. So 5 to 9. Getting air. And that's just, oh, sorry. That's just going up there. And then I can have like, let's do the whole rest of it, because why not? I could have just the little sequence of the little rotation to the top. Let's try to do the little rotation. So I think the rotation stops at 15. Yeah. So cube underscore air rotate. So this will be, what was the last one? 9. So let's do 10 to 15. That should just be rotating in the air. Yep. And then finally till the end. Let's just do it all the way to the end. So cube underscore fall back down, and that'll go from 16 to 35. So that's the whole thing. And this means I can individually call each one of these little sections animations. So this is kind of important, because what I can do in Max, so you see like I have 0 to 35 right now, I can do like one animation here, 0 to 35. If I go back to the time configuration, I can say, for example, 36 to 50. Let me set keys there. And I can have a completely different animation happen here. Go back here. And this is a completely different animation. And when I export them, I'll export them as like, I'll export them from 0 to 50. So there's actually two animations here. So there's one animation, which is this little jump thing that stops at 35. And then from 36 to 50, it's another weird animation. And that's how I would cut them up within Unity. Okay, so I cut them up to different animations here. Now, some people do it this way. Some people use layers. I like doing it this way because then you can scrub through all the animations at once, and you can just sequence them in here like this instead of dealing with layers. But there's no right or wrong way. I'm just showing you this way because I think this works easier, and you can like tweak any issues easier. Some people don't think so, but so that's done. And if I open this up now, oh, I need to apply. And you can see like each of these animations are here, and they all work. And they're all key framed to the cube. So if I drag the cube in, it doesn't have an animator controller, so I need to create an animator controller. Everyone remember all this stuff, or do I need to go over what's going on here? No one said anything, so I assume it's fine. I'm going to add the animator controller, and in the animator controller, where is it? Window, Mator. Oh, it's here. Hidden. I can then drag in my animations, so I can reference them. So drag all these animations in. Let me pull that out so you can see it easier. Do. Cube jumps there. So we can set this as the default. Let's start it as prepare to jump. So set as layer default state, meaning if I press play, it's going to play that animation. This animation right now doesn't have loop time, so you see that it just plays and stops. Right, so it doesn't have the loop time set, so it's not going to keep repeating. So I can just do stuff like prepare to jump, make transition to... What happened next? Was it getting air? Yeah, it was getting air, right? I can't remember. Project.
Is it not prepare to jump, then
Prepare to jump, getting air, rotate. Jump is the full sequence. So let's rename that actually, so I can full. Dang it. Full jump sequence. All right, so that's apply that, yes, and that should apply the animator. Well, I need to rename it here. So this is the annoying thing about the animator. The reference is correct. You can see that it's referencing full jump sequence, but like the actual holder in the animator hasn't updated, so you need to update. It's kind of annoying, but okay. So prepare to jump to getting air, and then we can go to air rotate, and we can go to fall back down. So if I press play, it'll just run through all of these. And I could loop it back down to prepare to jump. Cool. Alright, and then obviously, as any animator, I can set conditions. So I can have a parameter and set a condition of like, I don't know, like a trigger or something. And it will only allow it to go here when it gets that trigger. So whenever happens. So now I should be able to do it so I can control it. And you can control within code as well. So it should just play each sequence by itself. Yep. Then when I trigger, boop, goes to the next bit, and trigger to the next bit.
Right. What's the point of having the full jump sequence if it's not being connected, or will that be connected?
This?
Yeah.
It just depends what I want to do. So like if I wanted to.
Okay, sorry.
If I just want to, let me just make this the default state. If I don't want to control it, if I want to leave these away, and I just want it to be in the background, let's say, and it's just doing its thing, I'll just play just a full jump sequence. If I wanna control it individually, then I need to cut them up into different pieces. It really depends on what you're doing it. If I know for sure I'm never gonna use the full sequence, yeah, I don't need I can just delete that. You don't need it. It just depends what you need it for. I just wanted to show you both methods. All good?
Yep.
Okay. So that's how you would import something. And then the same with the cylinder. It should be exactly the same here. It's just rotating like so. And again, you can do these animations within Unity. They'll actually end up with the same thing. They'll have like a little animation that you can add into animator controllers. But this import export concept is the main thing I want to focus on today, because then we can move on to character animation. So let's try to do that really quickly, and then I'll give you a small assignment for next week. Not the biggest assignment, but a small assignment for next week that we're going to use for our next stage of animation, which is going to jump to a little more complicated. So if you want to take some time just to export it, import it, and like, you don't have to cut up the animation, just make sure it works. If you can get it working, then I know that you're good, and we can move on without any stress. So back recording. So what we're going to do from next week, and this is why I need you to have a little assignment, just a small one. So I have here a little Iron Giant. Let me unfreeze it. So that's the Iron Giant here. It is just a little mesh. And I've done something to it called a skin. So you can see there's the thing called a cat rig here. You can do like basic bones, but specifically within Max, there's this thing called a cat rig that I like to use because it's very easy to use. So usually when you add bones and assign kind of like bones, you can build a skeleton, but you have to specify like whether they're IK, whether they're FK, which way they rotate, blah, blah, blah. Whereas with a cat rig system, it is set up for, and I'll show you more about the cat rig next week. It is set up for you to be able to like create spines, for example. So like here's a spine, and if I do that, it acts like a normal spine would, even when I turn it. And then you can have stuff like arms, which again, same thing. They react like a normal arm would. You see the way like I'm moving it. So you can set this up using bones. You totally can. It's just a cat rig has preset like, arm, leg, and you can just dump them in. So it is kind of handy. It has its own quirks, but I think it's pretty useful for this. So this is a rig. Let me just turn off the skin for a sec. So it's literally just that model. Let me turn off all of these so you can see the model. So it's literally just that model. Very simple low poly model. One thing I would like you to do as well, I don't know if you can tell, let me go to editable poly. It's just pieces, right? And I like to do this for the initial rigging so you can understand it. So you can see like each piece is just like its own little separate piece. So they're not like merged together. And I want you to kind of make like a little robot like that, where all the pieces are not merged together. The reason being, it's easier to rig, and we'll see that. And we'll go to more complex rigging later. But for next week, I kind of want to just have a simple rig, okay? So let me just turn these back on. And I have this cat rig, so you can see the little bones there. Let me just make the Iron Giant transparent. So that's the cat rig. And it's like a little rig that I told the Iron Giant to follow. That's what the skin modifier does. So the Iron Giant's following that. And based on where I move the rig itself, the Iron Giant follows. And you can see like the mesh is deforming and following it. And I can set up animations like that. So there's like a little run cycle animation. Basic stuff. Okay, so that's what I would like for us to do next week. So we'll set up our own animations. I will also show you how to basically use Mixamo. You could probably figure it out by yourself. It's very easy. In scenarios where you don't need to make your own custom animations, you just want a generic animation, Mixamo does help quite a lot for that. So any questions on this so far? Again, just to reiterate, what I need you to create is some sort of like robot model that's bipedal, so it has elbows, it has doesn't have to have fingers, but it can. It has elbows, it has knees, it has like a normal torso and a head. In this, you don't have to have this. Why is someone getting annoyed? Oh, I wondered who was getting annoyed, but obviously. It doesn't have to have. I have like little extra bones, like that's the jaw, but you don't have to have that. But we'll have like a bipedal animation for it. So like just 2 legs, 2 arms, a body, and a head, humanoid.
So you just want us for next week to make a robot?
Yeah, it
make it.
really does not have to look good. We just want to get the rigging concept down.
Errol, I would love to see you try and make one of those.
Make one of what?
Dark Trooper.
Oh yeah, make a Dark Trooper. That's really easy. Just make a really easy, simple Dark Trooper.
Use the old
Nice and easy, nice and simple.
Nice and easy.
the old video game. What was it called? That's the Dark Troopers were first introduced in.
Maddie, do you see something wrong with your character concept?
Kodor, I think. Knights of the
Yeah.
Old Republic, wasn't it?
Doesn't have
no,
2
it
arms.
was Coda.
Really? I thought they were an Imperial thing.
Yeah, no, it was Coda. It was Coda. It wasn't the Old Republic.
Was it not? I can't remember.
Yeah.
There's a lot wrong with the horse. Let's be honest.
No,
Were
it
they
was
not
the.
introduced in like
It's the Star Wars game where you're a secret agent, Jedi person, or whatever.
Okay, so for next week, this is what I need you to make. I need you to create that. I need to have elbows. I need to have knees. You can have feet. You can have palms and stuff like that if you want. You don't have to. And hands and feet be separate from arms and legs. You mean like not merged? Like as in, so if I go down to here. So like the hand piece is like a complete separate piece. And all the little fingers are separate pieces. Ah, okay, yeah. For the ease of, for next week, yes. I think at some point we'll go over like basic character modeling, but character modeling has become really difficult because if you're doing a low poly character, you probably model it in Max, right? But if you're doing like a more complicated character, you might not even go to Max for ages. You might use like ZBrush or Mudbox to sculpt the character and then retopologize it and then bring it into Max or Maya or wherever you want to animate. So it's pretty complex. That's why I want to just start with this so we just understand the rigging and then we can figure out what we want later. Maybe we'll do like a little animated character thing. But we're going to have, you can have multiple arms if you want to be special, but I mean, it's going to be difficult. How do we attach all the pieces of the robot together? So in any editable poly, when you have an editable poly, you can just use the attach button to attach other pieces together. But to be fair, that is a good thing. I do want it to be one piece. So you can see the Iron Giant is the whole, that's one object. It's not like a head and a separate head and a body and a leg and whatever. They're all one object. I kind of want that. Well, Bran, we haven't done and modeling the low poly characters yet. There's certain things you need to know, especially for low poly. We can do low poly characters after this. I just want the robot so we understand rigging, and then we can do the low poly after that. I'm sure you're doing them fine. That's basic. It's pretty basic stuff. You just need to have like segments where they need to bend and enough segments so they don't bend awfully. Stuff like that. Any other questions on this? Yeah, you can start drawing your robot design now. You can show me and I'll say whether it's used. 2 knees, let me just be real clear. Let me just be really, really clear. Hey, Iron Giant, do you have an elbow? Yes, because I can bend the elbow. It's got like a hand as well, so I can do hand stuff. It's got knees and legs, so I can bend it. It's not like a wheel. I don't want to come next week and see like an R2-D2, and I'm like, that doesn't have bipedal. It needs to be able to bend its legs. Possibly a foot. We don't have to have the foot, but possibly a foot.
What if you gave a Gonk droid arms? Would it then meet the criteria?
You're giving him too much power.
Does it bend its legs?
Traditionally, but you could give him knee joints.
Yeah, then it just look weird. And then a torso, ideally, so I can do stuff like this. And then a head, so I can look around. It also doesn't have a head, because I can't look around if I don't have a head. Otherwise, I'd just be rotating the body, which doesn't quite...
Baz, you said don't do an R2 unit, but you didn't say the R2 unit Mandalorian is at the end of season 1.
You broke up halfway through it, and I'm not even
No
gonna...
astromech droids.
It's at the end of season 1 of the Mandalorian. It stands up and it's.
I don't care.
Really long arms.
I don't care what it is, but it's gotta have elbows. It's gotta have knees. It's gotta have a head. It's gotta have a torso, and have a pelvis. All right, those are your constraints. Don't even have to have feet or hands or fingers.
Did you say it needs to have a neck?
Not necessarily, no. It can just have a head. I'm recording too. This is going to go on YouTube as well. It's fine.
That's right.
Okay, so you can see here as well, just FYI, this is like 101 to 150, meaning there's other animation sequences before. So this is kind of like one of those concepts as well. We're going to try and do, like, there's some idles, there's like some walks, and we're going to try to do some jumps and stuff. And what we're going to do is we're going to set all these up, create a 3D character controller, and essentially link up all the animations, so when we move it, it moves, and it does all its animations when it's supposed to. And that's how you would make an actual character by yourself. And once we know how to do that, and once we know the basics, we can also use more complex characters, so we may do a chibi or a low poly character, and we may also do a Mixamo one, because the concept's the same. Mixamo will give you a bunch of different animations, but the concept's exactly the same. You'll use those animations and link them all together. Why do robots need idle animations? Because if the robot was just like that, it would just be kind of boring. It needs some idle animation.
He runs off of oxygen.
To make humans feel... to be honest, yeah, to make humans feel comfortable. So we'll do that. And then straight after that, that's probably going to be your first assignment, BT Dubs, creating a low poly character and animating it. So that's your first assignment, and you can see some examples from last year. And then your final assignment, you're only going to get 2 again this semester, just to make it, again, simpler. Not very robot-like to a smooth move. Oh, so this is actually serious. This is a serious thing. I'm going to show you animations that are pretty smooth, because you'll be able to use that for any kind of animation. It'll look not that robot-like, but at least it'll work if you're making a human. Now, that's a really good point, because I am working in a robot game right now, and it is a pain to make it look like a robot. It's actually a lot of work. So you kind of need to, like, add in stutters and stops and, like, jerks. You're trying to make it look janky, but not so janky that it looks like a bad animation, if that makes sense. So having it look like an actual robot actually is really tough. So that's a really good point. I am just showing you humanoid-ish animations on a robot. The only reason it's a robot is just so it's easier to rig. But really I'm trying to set you up for basic animations, because that way, once you know basic animations, you should be able to, like, after some experience and some learning, to understand how to do, like, more mechanical motions. Because mechanical motions that feel good are actually pretty tough. I mean, technically she's an android. That's a good show as well. It's a weird show, but I kind of like it. Alright, so are there any other questions around that or anything else we're going to do? I'm going to stop recording so you can ask questions.